It was Christmas Eve, the kind that should have been perfect. Outside, snow was falling in heavy, lazy flakes, covering the street in white silence. Inside our home, the air was warm and golden, heavy with the smell of roasted duck, cinnamon, and pine. A fire hissed quietly in the fireplace, its light dancing across the walls, and the faint sound of carols floated from the old speaker in the corner. I sat cross-legged on the floor of the living room, helping my twin boys, Liam and Evan, untangle a mess of tinsel and ornaments. They were identical in every way except for the stubborn streak in Liam's eyes and the way Evan laughed without ever holding back. "Dad?" Liam said, holding the silver star with both hands like it was the most precious thing in the world. "I'm older. I should put it on top." "You're older by 3 minutes," Evan shot back, lunging for the star. "That doesn't count." They wrestled on the rug, all elbows and giggles, while the lights from the Christmas tree painted their faces in red and green. For a moment, I just watched them, the joy, the innocence, and let myself believe that life was exactly as it appeared. I finally scooped them both up, their legs kicking in the air, and lifted them toward the top of the tree. "How about you both do it together?" Their small hands reached up, side by side, and set the star perfectly on the highest branch. It was one of those picture-perfect moments you want to trap in a snow globe forever. From the kitchen, I heard the clatter of pans and the sharp hiss of oil meeting a hot pan. Isabella, my wife, was moving between the stove and the counter, her long dark hair brushing her shoulders as she basted the duck. She looked beautiful in that soft, unthinking way you only notice after years of marriage, wearing a simple cream sweater and jeans. She smiled at me when she noticed I was watching her. But it was brief. The moment she thought I turned away, her smile vanished. Her eyes flicked, not to the food but toward the hallway. It wasn't the kind of glance that comes from distraction. It was the kind that comes from fear. I walked into the kitchen, my footsteps muffled by the rug. "Everything okay?" I asked, leaning against the doorway. She startled, almost spilling the tray she was holding. "Of course, love," she said too quickly, setting the tray down and brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Just making sure dinner's perfect for your parents." Something about her voice was wrong. I knew her tones the way I knew my own heartbeat. This one was forced, tight at the edges. But I told myself it was the holidays. The stress. That's what you do when you trust someone. You explain away the cracks before they shatter. I turned to leave, and that's when I heard it. From the dining room, my father's voice, low and urgent. "We can't tell Adam about Isabella's secret. Not now. Not about the child in Boston." I froze. My pulse started pounding in my ears. My mother's voice followed, trembling. "But the girl. She looks exactly like Paul. Paul, my younger brother, my best friend, missing for nearly 6 months. Everyone had been told he was on a long overseas business trip. No calls, no postcards, no emails, nothing." I stood there, unmoving, the kitchen doorframe pressing into my shoulder. The sounds of the house seemed to fade. The crackle of the fire, the laughter of my boys in the other room, the Christmas carols, all replaced by a hollow roar in my head. A child. My brother. Boston. The pieces didn't make sense yet, but they cut just the same. My hands curled into fists, my nails digging into my palms. Years of discipline, in business, in life, kept my face still when all I wanted was to walk into that dining room and demand the truth. But instead, I stood there, silently watching Isabella sprinkle rosemary over the duck, her movements calm, almost serene, and I wondered how many lies she'd told me while looking me straight in the eyes. It was the first moment I realized that this Christmas, this perfect, snow globe Christmas, might be the beginning of the end. I didn't say a word that night, not to Isabella, not to my parents. I just played the part of the devoted husband and dutiful son, carving the duck, pouring wine, smiling at jokes I didn't hear. Every second, I replayed their words in my head, like they'd been etched into glass. The child in Boston. She looks exactly like Paul. Paul who had vanished without a trace. Every time Isabella looked at me, I searched her face for the truth. Every twitch, every hesitation, every carefully placed smile felt like a piece of a puzzle I hadn't realized I was solving. When dessert was served, I excused myself. Work call? I lied, my voice steady. No one questioned it. My business often demanded late-night attention. That reputation, I realized, was about to become my greatest weapon. I went upstairs to my home office and shut the door. The moment the lock clicked, my body changed. The mask dropped. My heartbeat slowed. My breathing steadied. This wasn't shock anymore, it was precision. I pulled a suitcase from the closet and began to pack. Not like someone going on a trip, but like a soldier preparing for a mission. Everything had purpose. A burner phone, my laptop with encrypted drives, a locked file of legal contacts I trusted, cash enough to disappear if I needed to. The murmur of conversation downstairs drifted up like a cruel reminder of what I'd lost. My phone buzzed. My father. I almost didn't answer. Adam, there's more, he said, voice tight with guilt. Isabella's pregnant again. And Paul's wife went to the police. She says he's been missing for 3 days, not months. He never left for that business trip. The words landed like another knife. Pregnant. Another man's child? Paul's disappearance wasn't a trip. It was something darker. I have work to do, I said, my voice flat. I'll be in touch. I hung up before he could say anything else. When I came downstairs, Isabella was in the hallway. Her hands were still damp from washing dishes. Going somewhere? She asked, her voice light. Too light. Detroit. I lied smoothly. Project deadline. Can't wait. But it's Christmas. Money doesn't take holidays, Isabella. I zipped the suitcase shut, and then I let my eyes meet hers. Cold, deliberate. Neither does justice. Something flickered in her expression then. Fear. I checked into a small, nondescript hotel 2 towns over under the name Daniel Cross. Paid in cash. No digital trace. The room was plain. Beige walls, a desk, a bed. But it was exactly what I needed. I called my oldest friend and business partner, Jack Whitmore. I need you to handle everything at the office for a few days, I told him. Everything okay? He asked. It will be, I said. If anyone asks where I am, Detroit. Riverside Project. You understand? A pause. Got it. Then I called Ryan Keller, a private investigator I'd used before. He was discreet, thorough, and expensive, the perfect combination. We met in the hotel bar an hour later. He walked in wearing a worn leather jacket, his expression unreadable. I need everything on Isabella Morgan and a man named Victor Harlow, I told him, sliding a thick envelope across the table. Bank records, phone logs, travel history, especially anything tied to Boston. And I want it fast. Ryan glanced at the envelope. This is personal. Yes, I said. Very personal. And if you find anything, you call me first. No one else hears about it. He nodded slowly. 3 years back enough? Make it 5, I said. I don't care what it costs. That night, I barely slept. Instead, I sat at the desk, building a timeline. What I knew, what I suspected, where the gaps were. Every instinct I had as a businessman, every skill I'd used to design projects and close deals, was now aimed at one purpose: dismantling the web they'd built around me. I wasn't just looking for the truth. I was preparing to use it as a weapon. The first report from Ryan came 2 days later. I was sitting at the small desk in my hotel room, the blinds drawn, when I heard the knock. 3 short taps, our agreed signal. I opened the door and he walked in without a word, a manila folder under his arm. You might want to pour yourself a drink before you look at this, he said. I didn't. My hands were steady as I opened the folder. Inside, photographs, financial statements, copies of text messages. The first picture stopped me cold. Isabella, standing outside a hotel in Boston, laughing, her arm linked with a tall, sharply dressed man I didn't recognize, Victor Harlow. The second photo was worse. Them together in a hotel room, caught through a slightly ajar door, his hand on her waist like he'd known her forever. I kept turning the pages. Bank records showing regular transfers from Victor's development company into an account in Isabella's name. Hotel bookings, flight receipts, calls that lasted hours at strange times of the night. And then a birth certificate. Boston. A 4-year-old girl named Sophie. Mother, Catherine Moore. Father, Paul Morgan, my brother. My pulse slowed to a dangerous calm. Ryan was talking, his voice low and measured. The Boston connection is solid. Victor's company is paying your wife. And your brother, he had a daughter. That's her. The resemblance is hard to miss. I stared at the page a moment longer before closing the folder. Keep digging, I said. I want everything on Victor's business dealings. Every partner, every investor, every weakness. By the 4th day, I had more than enough to know the truth, but I wasn't ready to act. This wasn't going to be a screaming match in the kitchen or a desperate confrontation in the driveway. This was going to be an execution. I started calling in favors. From my office, Jack sent me old contracts connected to Victor's developments. My assistant, Maya, sharp, loyal, and unshakable, began quietly combing through public records for anything that didn't add up. It didn't take long. Victor's company was a shell built on lies, inflated property valuations, falsified inspection reports, bribes to city officials, and, buried deep in the mess, permits tied to the exact projects Paul had been reviewing before he vanished. That night, I called Ryan again. There's one more thing I need, I told him. I want eyes on Victor. I want to know where he eats, who he meets, what he whispers when he thinks no one is listening. Surveillance, then? He asked. Round the clock. The next day, Ryan introduced me to someone I didn't expect. A man named Dean Calloway, small-time gambler, brother to one of Victor's associates. Desperate. We met in a dimly lit bar on the south side of the city. Dean's eyes darted toward the door every few seconds. His fingers twitched around his glass like he couldn't decide whether to drink from it or smash it. I know you owe Tommy Reyes 50 grand, I said evenly. That's a debt you won't walk away from, unless... I slid an envelope across the table. You work for me instead. Dean swallowed. What do you want? Information. Every conversation your sister has with Victor. Every meeting. Every deal. And you don't breathe a word about this to anyone. If you do, Tommy will be the least of your problems. He stared at the envelope for a long time before pulling it toward him. You didn't hear it from me, but Victor, he's nervous. Investors are getting spooked. Someone's feeding them information. I allowed myself the smallest smile. Good. From that point on, it was like building a skyscraper in reverse, dismantling the structure piece by piece. I sent anonymous tips to Victor's competitors, quietly alerted certain investors to the falsified inspection records, fed city regulators enough information to open new investigations. Every move was precise, deliberate. Meanwhile, at home, Isabella began to panic. She called me twice a day. I never answered. When she finally got through, her voice was trembling. Adam, are you angry with me? You've been so distant. I almost laughed at the understatement. Just busy, I said. But don't worry. Everything's under control. If she heard the venom under those words, she didn't let it show. Within a week, Victor's empire was cracking. 3 of his biggest investors pulled out. City inspectors shut down one of his projects. Local news began sniffing around after whispers of fraud. Dean called me late one night, his voice low and urgent. Victor's losing it. Says someone's coming after him hard. He told my sister you're acting strange, that you might suspect something. I looked out the hotel window, the city lights glowing in the distance. Tell him, I said slowly, that he has no idea how right he is. By the time I came home, it had been almost 2 weeks since Christmas Eve. On the surface, everything looked the same. The tree was still up, the lights still blinked softly in the living room, and the smell of pine still lingered in the air. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt it, the shift. Isabella's smile when she saw me didn't reach her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for my coat. The boys are upstairs doing homework, she said, her voice too bright. They'll be so happy to see you. I nodded. Good. I need to catch up on some work first. I didn't go to my office. Not right away. Instead, I stood in the hallway listening. Upstairs, the boys laughed over something. Isabella moved into the kitchen, her phone buzzing. I could hear her whisper into it. He's back, she said. Yes, I think he knows something. No, I haven't told him about Boston. Stop worrying. We'll stick to the plan. I waited until she hung up before walking into my study. I opened my laptop and pulled up the live feed from Ryan's surveillance. Every call, every meeting, every whisper between her and Victor was there, recorded and transcribed. And the files on Victor's fraud, bribery, and ties to my brother's disappearance were stacked neatly in my briefcase, ready for the final blow. The following night, I made my move. Victor had a private meeting scheduled with what was left of his investors at the top floor of a downtown high-rise. Ryan and I arrived early, setting up in the conference room before he could get there. When Victor finally walked in, his face was pale, his usual swagger gone. You said you had a deal to discuss, he snapped. Sit down, I told him. We do have something to discuss. The end of your career. His jaw tightened. You think you can? I opened the briefcase and began laying out the evidence like blueprints. Photos of him with Isabella. Bank records showing the payments. Copies of falsified inspection reports. The birth certificate of Sophie, proving Paul's connection. And, finally, the payment to a known hitman, dated the day before my brother disappeared. Victor's face drained of color. This is enough to bury you, I interrupted. Fraud. Bribery, conspiracy, murder. He tried to lunge across the table, but Ryan was faster. He slammed Victor back into his seat, holding him there with a hand on his shoulder. You killed my brother, I said quietly, and you made the mistake of thinking I wouldn't find out. His eyes flickered, the smallest sign of guilt, before turning hard again. You can't prove it. I already have, I said, and the police are waiting downstairs. When the officers led him away in handcuffs, I felt nothing. No rush of satisfaction. No release. Just a cold certainty that the first part was over. The second part waited at home. That night, when the boys were asleep at my parents' house, I found Isabella in our bedroom, folding laundry. We need to talk, I said. My tone must have told her everything, because she froze. I dropped a thick folder onto the bed. I know about Boston. I know about Victor. I know everything. She glanced at the folder but didn't open it. I can explain. Don't. I cut her off. Every text, every call, every hotel room. Your part in covering up Paul's disappearance. You helped the man who killed him, and now you're carrying his child. Her face crumpled. I didn't know he would. You knew enough? I said, my voice low but sharp. The divorce papers will be served tomorrow. I'm filing for full custody of the boys. You'll never see them again. Tears spilled down her cheeks. They need their mother. They need truth, I said coldly. And stability. Two things you can't give them. When I walked out of the room, she was sobbing. But I didn't look back. The weeks that followed moved quickly. Victor's arrest made headlines. Federal investigators tore apart his company. Isabella's role in hiding financial transactions and lying about Paul put her in front of the police. She took a plea deal, a reduced sentence in exchange for testifying against him. Dean disappeared with the money I'd paid him, starting over somewhere far from the city. My parents moved closer to Boston to help Paul's daughter, Sophie. By spring, I'd won full custody. Isabella's parental rights were terminated. That Christmas, the house was different. The shadows were gone. The boys decorated the tree with their cousin Sophie, laughing and chasing each other around the living room. I lifted them one by one to place the star on top. For the first time in a long time, the light in that room felt real. I sat back and watched them, knowing the truth. The guilty had fallen. The innocent were safe. And my brother's name would not fade quietly. Justice wasn't about rage. It was about building something stronger in the ruins. And I had built exactly that.